So he has transitioned through careers and non-for-profit organizations. He is a true community organizer. He has been to camp, he has led many Sikh camps, and as Gurpreet Panji was telling me today, that he actually organized one of the first camps in Pennsylvania, good start. So the history is quite long. He's also an attorney, a consultant, and founder and CEO and executive. So with that, I would like to invite Mandeep Singh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you all very much for being here on a Friday evening. I know that everyone's got many things to do, and it's an honor to be here with SikhRI and the organization. And it's very difficult to follow these two lovely young ladies. I mean, the reality is that their art, their contribution, that's the true inspiration behind why any of us should be contributing to the community. As somebody who's grown up here and somebody who really thinks about this, like, this is the true value. So I'd like actually another round of applause for what these young people have accomplished. You know, at certain times in our lives, we think about what's important to us, and then at some later point, we think about what's important to our family, and then maybe later on, we think about what's important to society. And all of us get the chance to contribute in many different ways. I'm not really sure why I was asked to be here. I feel really honored and privileged. I'm not nearly the leader as many of you in the room are, but I think maybe there was an opportunity to share a different type of story with you. And I think, you know, when I was thinking about the audience that I wanted to address, I'll give you a little bit of my background. The topic that I actually wanted to cover today was about change and religion. The world that we live in and the speed of the world we live in, coming from Silicon Valley, I'd like to give you a little bit of that. And then a little bit about how each of us have a chance to do something to make that a little bit better. So let me give you a little bit of my background. I'm an American. I was born in England, raised in the United States since the age of 1, lived in New York till I was 5, lived in rural North Carolina starting in 1975, which will tell you how old I am. So when we moved to this town in North Carolina, which you would think, you know, 1975, there were 7 billboards that says the Ku Klux Klan welcomes you to Smithfield, North Carolina. They were on the highway, we still moved there. My dad says they have 3 Ks, we have 5, we're good, right? So we actually had no idea what we were going to have, because at the end of the day, you don't really know what's going to come next. So in this small rural town, my father's an orthopedic surgeon, we grow up trying to understand what does it mean to be us, but we only know one us. We only know that one identity. So as a young person looking around you and trying to figure out how you fit in, you realize you're not going to fit in, and it's okay. And so you keep on figuring out, well, maybe things will just change, and it doesn't really matter, because what I've learned over the course of my life is they do. So I had an opportunity to go to Duke University. At Duke University, I was president of my class. Right? So why? Why am I president of the class? Because everyone knew who I was, and that was part of the change that I had the opportunity to be part of. When I left Duke, I started Logar Retreat, which was mentioned earlier. It was the first National Sikh Youth Organization camp. We bought a campsite in Pennsylvania. Why? Because we needed to. It was something that needed to get done. And over the course of time, you can see pattern after pattern after pattern of us just figuring out what needs to happen and then going to do it. And again, reflecting back on what these girls are saying, that doesn't change. We all have an opportunity to do that. So I got a JD from the University of Virginia, I have an MBA from the University of Virginia, and then I have too many degrees. So like, all right, so what does somebody like this do? So I got to be an attorney. I was an attorney at Latham & Watkins. I was the first Sikh they ever hired. That's pretty interesting. Why? Well, because everyone told me that I wasn't going to get a job if I had a turban on my head in a top law firm, and that's not true. Then I got a job at McKinsey, and I was one of the first ones there to wear a turban. Not the first, but one of the first. It's a global firm. You're like, all right, so I've got this now. Then I decided I was going to start a company in technology, the only brown guy in Silicon Valley who's not an engineer, right? And I'm like, okay, so I started a technology company focusing on kids technology, again, something I know absolutely nothing about. So what happens then? The company gets acquired by Disney. Disney also doesn't have any Sikhs working over there. So it's a really interesting opportunity to go through all these things and say, if you try to plan your life forward, you actually miss all the opportunities to be in the moment. So company was acquired by Disney, that was a phenomenal experience, and I left to go start another company called One Student Body. One Student Body's objective was to connect the world's students, which was an interesting objective because we have a whole new set of things going on here. I'm happy to talk to you about kids and technology a little bit later on. And after a few years of doing that, I got an opportunity to go work at Facebook, which is the world's largest platform. 1.7 billion monthly active users, more than 1 billion people accessing the platform every day on mobile. And so suddenly I have an opportunity to play in a different space. So a guy whose parents moved from India at a very early age, born in England, grew up in the hospitals around New York City, rural town in North Carolina, is now working at Facebook. And so if that doesn't tell you something about change, I think we're missing an important point. And so I was reflecting back on what does it mean to think about change in religion and how we think about our lives and how we get stuck in certain paradigms. I thought over the 24 decades between the time that Guru Nanak Dev Ji was born and Guru Gobind Singh Ji passed away, that's 24 decades. Very little changed, right? Lots of things happened, but very little changed. And I want you to compare that to the speed of change that's happening today. So when I was 14 years old, my grandfather would complain, he goes, Mandeep, I write you letters and you never write me back. I'm like, Nanaji, I call you. And he's like, well, it's not the same. And then I graduate from college, my mom's like, Mandeep, I call you and you never call me back. I'm like, Mom, I emailed you, right? And she's like, well, that's not the same. And now I send email messages to my 14-year-old son. I'm like, Zaravar, I email you and you never email me back. He's like, Dad, I texted you, right? And I'm like, but it's not the same. And then you realize, wait, in one generation, from the time I was 14 to the time my son is 14, we've gone through multiple modes of communication. And if you take a look at my grandfather, from his day forward till the beginning of time, if you wanted to communicate with somebody who was not standing in front of you, you had to write a letter. And when you wrote that letter, you had no idea if that letter was ever going to be received. And you had to think about something that was important enough to write about because it wasn't going to be received, even if it was, for a very long time. And the response to that letter was going to take several weeks after that to get back to you. So the patterns of communication that have existed for centuries have changed in one generation. Whereas I could show you right now my daughter and my wife and my kids and my dog on that screen in real time from California. So what does that mean about change? It means that in our lifetime, we're experiencing the type of thing that nobody else has ever experienced since the beginning of time. I was speaking at a conference on Wednesday on innovation, and the topic of conversation is self-driving cars, right? 100 years ago, the conversation was cars, right? And 100 years later, the conversation is self-driving cars. They're run by batteries. They're owned by Uber in Pittsburgh. And suddenly you realize there's an entire fleet of things changing right before our eyes. Whereas at 16 years old, I was really excited about cars and everyone I knew was trying to talk about what car they were going to get. And my kids will probably never have that same type of experience in one generation. So we think about the change of communication. We think about the change in transportation. We think about all other forms of change that we can imagine. I think about, when I was a kid and I was really, really excited about getting a Walkman. Right? And my parents were really excited about getting me a Walkman because I suddenly wouldn't have to play with the radio anymore. I would have something that covered my ears and they wouldn't have to listen to my music and I would get to listen to what I wanted to. And now there's no song that I couldn't get right now on my phone by streaming, right? So access has changed. Every single thing that we can imagine about how we engage in daily life has changed. When my relatives in India wanted something from here, we would have to go get it, we would think about it, we'd have to figure out where we're going to buy it, we'd get it, we'd store it, we'd keep it, and then we'd have to wait for someone to fly there, and then we'd have to go visit them, and we have to get it to them, and now they can just go to Amazon, right? And in a matter of moments, a thing that they never could have gotten in their lifetime will be at their doorstep within 48 hours. So the reason I'm going through all this is to understand we sometimes take for granted we live in a place and we live in a time where you can't define something that's not possible. And I want you to now think about that in terms of religion. Because for many of us, when we came to this country, when our families moved here or whatever it was, we always had this idea of yeah, it'll be hard and I'm not really sure and this isn't the right place. And many people who we know decided that they couldn't maintain their identity or that the identity was really hard. And I think one of the things that I realize now after having lived in this country for a long time, and my father fits in that same category, I'll give you his example. My father is a surgeon, but he was raised in Amritsar, right? So he was raised in a community where one would have thought that he would have become a Sikh automatically, but he actually was never taught to read Gurmukhi. So even though he was a Sikh, he actually didn't have any real Sikhi. He had exposure, he had the environment, but he was an activated Sikh after he left India and realized that if he was ever going to hold on to something, he had to find a way to go do that. And he taught himself how to read Gurbani because he wanted to make that happen. And then with children, he wanted that to happen even more. That activation was something that was really hard, but guess what? It was possible. And we think about those same constructs today, like what does it take to be activated? And I use the example of the girls who went to Siddha. Like, it actually isn't just enough to be born into a Sikh family. And it's not enough to be a member of a Bhangra team. And it's not enough to go to Gurdwara every once in a while. That's not what it means to be a Sikh in this country. It actually means that you're entitled to be a Sikh, but you're not actually one yet. And then you start to think about activation, and what does activation mean? So I'll take this back to the software world, right, and the change that we live in today. I focus on building software. I'm a product leader at Facebook. And one of the things that we really try to understand is a user-centric experience. So like, what does it mean to the user? When you think about it from religion, you're like, all right, product-centric belief would be, SikhRI is this thing, right? So we have this Guru Granth Sahib, and we have to make sure the Guru Granth Sahib gets out to all the people, and we have these banis, and we have this kirtan. These are all, let's call them products, right? So we think a very product-centric view. It's really important that we revere the Guru Granth Sahib in this way, and it's really important that we do the kirtan in this way, but we actually don't think about the user. We don't think about the user's experience. And in this country, that's becoming an even bigger problem, because the user's experience of somebody who looks like me is they don't understand a thing. It's actually not possible for them to understand because of certain barriers that we've created in language and time and distance and context. So we suddenly find ourselves living in a world where everything else has changed except for us, and except for the way we want to think about how we engage with the people around them. And if you think about why that change is happening, if you think about why cars have become self-driving and why that kind of networks have become so large, it's because someone decided to look at the user. And I'm wondering, and this is the opportunity that I think we have with Siddiq, and one of the reasons I get so excited about coming and participating in these types of things, that finally someone's thinking about the user. Finally someone's taking the time to understand, what does it mean to actually participate in the program? What does activation look like from a user's perspective? What does it take for someone to really understand how they're going to engage with their religion? What does it take for someone to feel different as a result of an experience that they had? It's not about building the program and putting it out. When you watch the video at the beginning, that was a list of all the products. What you really need to understand is the experience. And if you get back to what Facebook does and what we do in Silicon Valley and how we think about how we drive that change, it's not enough to build the product. You have to get activation. And that activation is the hardest thing in the world. First step problem is acquisition. How do you get someone to go download your product? How do you get someone to go use it? The next hardest thing is activation. And if your activation doesn't work, you don't have what we call retention, right? Someone doesn't stay. So someone has the product and you ask me, do you have the product? Yes, I have it on my phone. Do you ever use it? No, not really. Do you even understand how it works? No, not really. That's SikhRI for a generation of kids brought up in this country today, right? And it's not a problem we created. It was created because of the change. And the change is the only constant. So I think when you start to really break down, like, why is it that I wanted to pick this topic today, is that we're in a phenomenal place and a phenomenal time. Like, I can be on a plane, I can be here on internet, I actually could have done this thing live. We have the opportunity to reach thousands, millions of people with a message that we all believe in. On a Friday night, we've stopped what we're doing to come here because we believe in it. But we can't get that activation unless we learn how to do it. And learning how to do it is expensive, and learning how to do it is hard. Facebook was not built overnight. All the companies that compete with Facebook were not built overnight. It takes a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort, and a vision. And that vision is actually one of the most important things to understand. And the vision here, and the reason I'm more excited about coming to a place like SikhRI than it is to think about the buildings, is that the buildings really aren't that important anymore, right? It's hard for us to believe, but the buildings don't matter as much as they used to. And they're important to have, I'm not suggesting that they're not, but the buildings by themselves don't make Sikhs. And if you don't have something there that actually has the potential to make Sikhs, the buildings will become empty. And I know it's not a threat that I'm trying to make broadly, but take a look at the example of change in the real world. My son is 14 years old. He goes to Stanford Online High School. Stanford Online High School. He's at home. He's connecting with 700 of the top students from all around the world, all online, with a faculty of PhDs, all from all over the world, who are teaching courses in real time with people everywhere in the world. It's not a fantasy, it's today's reality. So if you wanted to convene a group of Sikhs and activate them, why do they have to live in New Jersey? They could live anywhere. Well, if you don't have a program and you don't have a vision and you don't have the ability to connect them, it doesn't matter. You're not going to do anything. And so the reason I wanted to pick this topic of change in religion is not about, oh, the religion needs to be updated to meet the times. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. I think the religion has to be understood in the context of the people who are going to engage in that religion. And it's not enough just to have people who are born as Sikhs. All of us, like my struggle with 3 children, is how do I make sure they have the opportunity to become Sikhs? I think it's important to think about that. How do they have the opportunity to become Sikhs? Not my kids are Sikhs. Because the opportunity will only come when they're activated. And parental activation is important, but it's not exclusive. My father wasn't activated by his parents, my mother wasn't activated by her parents. They were activated because of a context and a time and a community. And I'll bet these girls here weren't just activated by their families, they were activated because of experiences that other people created for them. And I wasn't asked to come here to be a fundraiser for the community. I think SikhRI is a phenomenal organization. All of us have our own choices and decisions to make. But it was really important to me to make a point about program and understanding the role of program and understanding kind of what does that change need to be. Because if we don't get that, if we don't buy that vision, if we don't actually deliver against it, this change is going to happen and we are going to be sitting on the sidelines. It's not, wouldn't it be great if we could do this thing? It's more like, why aren't we doing this thing? Whatever in the world is possible for our children to go do, for the experiences that they would have, there's an equivalent version of that for our community. There's an equivalent version of that for our religion. There's an equivalent version of that for our families, right? And that has to be made by somebody. Now, I don't have the capacity to do it. I can't do it myself. Because I have other things that I do. I've made economic choices, I have family commitments. But if you can find anybody, anywhere, who's willing to take that step, who's willing to put in the vision, to build a vision, to put in dedication, time, and patience to go make it happen, please, please, please support it. I plan on supporting it, and I hope all of you plan on supporting it too, because without that, you don't have the opportunity to get activation. So we can still keep on giving birth to more Sikhs, and we can still have these wonderful opportunities to celebrate ourselves, and we can build the buildings for everyone to go to. But if you don't find that way to look at the user and understand who's today user, the user of today in America, then you're really going to lose an entire generation that has the potential to do more than any generation that's ever existed before. I guarantee you the change that we've seen in the past will be even greater in the future. The speed at which change is happening is not slowing at all. And if we want to talk about that afterwards, I'm happy to do it. But Silicon Valley is a phenomenal place to look and see potential. Let's look and see the potential of our community, right? The potential of our community is far greater than what we're delivering today. And I'm preaching to the choir because all of you are here, but as was said before, it doesn't happen on its own. Make a choice, make a commitment, make a decision that you're ultimately going to be part of that change. And our community should not sit by while the world around it changes. Our community should get in front and change from the inside. Because the world is looking for something new. Because all of this speed that they're going through right now is causing hurt and harm. The pace is unparalleled. So we have these ideas of mindfulness, we have these new notions of coming up, religion is dying, spirituality is increasing, and we have something to offer. And if we can't find a way to get onto the mediums that the entire world is consuming, if we can't figure out how to be influential there, if we can't build high quality content, and today we can't, we're not good at it. It's absolutely not a product that we think will scale. But if we don't invest in it, it will never be to that point. And I think with the change that we see in the world today, the message of the gurus from hundreds of years ago that's caused generations of our families to make us come to this state, to this place, to this time, we have the opportunity to do that with a multiplier. Because the platforms of distribution are unparalleled. It's never existed before that a single person with a single message can reach 1 billion people. But it happens now, and we have the opportunity to make that happen. So when we start to think about change in religion, understand the world that we live in today is fast, and we should also be fast. And if we can do that today and come together, I think that's phenomenal. I've had the opportunity to go through a lot of change. And I talk to my kids, when you ask children today, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, look at me. I have no idea what I want to be. Because every 3 or 4 years, I'm somebody completely different. That is the opportunity that we have today. As a religion, I think we also have to look at that. Every 3 or 4 years, we have the opportunity to be completely different. Sitting over here, getting access to the things that we have today, I hope that many of you will take this message home with you and say, you know what? Yes, it's okay to say we came to an event and we did something and that was great, and we're going to go to Gurdwara on Sunday, and then we'll go to Gurdwara again next Sunday. But if we can make a commitment to say, wow, let's just take a step back and realize Khalsa school could be virtual, right? These Gurbani Vichar circles that not everyone's showing up for every week, they start with a lot of momentum and suddenly they die off, they could be virtual. We can actually connect with people anywhere in the world. We can bring messages together from all different places. We can actually find the equivalent of Superwoman for entertainment, for spirituality, right? It can happen, there's absolutely no reason it can't. But it can't happen if someone doesn't try. So find a way, in your own personal way, whatever way you choose to do it, to make that part of what you want to commit to. Because coming out on a Friday night is great. Hopefully when you go back, you'll go back with an amazing painting. But you'll also go back with an idea that each of us has a chance to do something more than we were ever able to do before, because the world has changed. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.